Hi, I'm Jake Sapirstein from LiftCentro. LiftCentro is a digital marketing consultancy, but we focus heavily on helping brands build and really scale out test and learn or experimentation programs. And after having built and run a test and learn program at a large enterprise company for several years, I'm often asked about tips and techniques on how to build and really scale out such a program. So what I thought I'd do in the next few minutes is package together 6 tips on how to build a test and learn program. Let's dive in. Tip number 1 is to find analytical minds. Now, when you're building a program from scratch to do experimentation work, you may not have open headcount. You may have to be resourceful and look from within to build a team. So the area that you want to focus on are really people that have an analytical inclination or way of thinking. Now, you look at analytics teams, that's a good starting place. But these days, analytical minds are really scattered throughout the organization, different teams, different functions. Some people just like to look at data more than others. Some people have a comfort level with data that's greater than others. And so you want to find those minds and see if you can pull in a couple of those people to help form your initial experimentation team. Now, why focus on analytical mindsets? Well, one reason is analytics is part of experimentation. So when you're doing an experiment, you're actually producing data, and that data needs to be analyzed. Also, when you're coming up with test concepts, different ideas for testing, the best ideas are really rooted in some form of data. And so you want to have people that have a comfort level looking at data, being able to think of concepts of how to improve, where to test based on data. The other less obvious reason you want to focus on people with analytical mindsets is people that are looking at data tend to be people that are focused on improvement or how to improve, right? They are looking at data, where the problems are, where the high bounce rates are, for example, on a website. That's just an example. But people that are focused on data are often looking at a snapshot of a baseline of where you're at today in your journey to reach certain organizational goals. So finding people with analytical mindsets is a great place to start. Tip number 2 is to build a core centralized team. So it's really important, even from the get-go, to have testing expertise. At the beginning, you may have to have external resources augment your internal team in order to accomplish that. So usually your initial core centralized team is going to comprise of a mix of internal and external resources to drive the program, right? So you need to have that expertise from the beginning on how to set up an experiment, how to design an experiment, understand things like test sample size and duration, be able to come up with sound test concepts from actual data. So mining quant and qual research to formulate hypotheses, to develop sound test concepts. So you want to have that expertise that people from different parts of the company can turn to drive that testing execution. Tip number 3, develop test and learn ambassadors. So what do I mean by an ambassador? An ambassador is not someone that gets paid to do experimentation. They have day jobs, and they're in different parts and pockets of the larger organization. They do have a testing spirit. That's a really important trait that you want to look for before assigning people these roles that happen to be in addition to their regular job. And so the idea of having these ambassadors is not only to bring test concepts to the centralized team coming from the area of the company that they sit in. And that could be the design team, it could be the development team, it could be a different line of business or geography. Really, whatever pocket that they sit in, they're acting as a conduit to bring test concepts to the table. In addition to that, their role is to evangelize and remind people of the practice, the capability of experimentation. And this is really important because a lot of times what happens is people naturally think about experimentation late in a process. So after a web page has been deployed, we naturally will start to think about that as a baseline and how to beat that baseline, how to get better, how to improve, how to drive more engagement, how to drive more sales from a product page. So naturally, we think about testing more late in a process after things have been deployed. But really great programs and cultures are developed when you can start to get people thinking about experimentation early in a process. So when requirements are being gathered and defined for a web page or a product or a launch, you want to start to develop ideas, alternative ways of doing things early in the process. And having ambassadors planted throughout the organization helps to remind people to think about the testing practice, the testing possibilities early in processes. Point number 4 is to be goal-centric. And by goal-centric, I don't mean just having goals, but actually touting goals again and again over time. And so that could be management cascading goals to the team doing the execution work on a monthly or quarterly basis. And the idea is to remind people not only of the presence of the goals, but what those goals are and what the progress is at that point in time towards those goals. Now, why is this important in the context of experimentation? Well, when you're touting goals again and again, it instills a performance-oriented mindset. And when people have that performance-oriented mindset, they're naturally going to be thinking about ideas of how to improve, how to do better, how to meet those goals faster. And when you start ideating, coming up with concepts, new ideas, thinking out of the box, it's a natural segue to think about experimentation, right? Because it's experimentation that actually tells us with hard data what tactics are working really well, which ones are not working well, which ones do we need to stop right now. It's experimentation that guides us on how to reach our goals faster. And so it all starts with goals and being goal-centric. Communicate learnings broadly. This is really important to get your quant and qual research learnings disseminated beyond that research core and into different pockets and corners of the company. And we think this is so important, and we're actually building a platform called Datatinga to help brands cascade those learnings farther and wider across the organization. The reason why this is so important is really twofold. One is more obvious, and that is the more people that are aware of the insights and the underlying data, the more people are in position to take action on the data, right? And more action is going to drive more incremental value from that research. The other reason why it's important to cascade insights is a little less obvious. And that is when a lot of people that are not familiar with those insights, not familiar with the research or even the programs like experimentation behind the research, what happens is they get surprised by some of the results of tests, for example. And so a natural response to surprises is to develop a sense of curiosity. The curiosity starts to focus on the possibilities of what you could test going forward. So what I found over the years is that as you cascade insights farther and broader across the organization, driving more reach, you're going to tend to get more engagement with experimentation going forward. More engagement means more experiments means more business value. So it all starts with really cascading the learnings farther and wider across your organization. Tip number 6 is to test everywhere. And by this, I don't mean test every copy block on every web page or even test every web page. But what I mean is going beyond website testing, going beyond marketing. A lot of programs start in marketing focused on design and copy, and these are fine places to start a testing program. But when you want to build and scale out a really comprehensive testing program, it really comes down to developing a mindset of coming up with alternative approaches to doing everything that's done, to be able to experiment, to measure, and to validate your way forward. That's really the key. So that's a wrap. Those are 6 tips on how to build a test and learn program. If you want more insights like this, we have a paper called The 20 Keys to Building a Data-Driven Culture, and that can be found on liftcentro.com. Good luck on building out your test and learn programs.